The great Maharami Pono, who is a great Mekubal, ends up saying in his Seder Gilgulim something very interesting. Shechem ben Chamor, as we all know, took advantage of Dinah. And as a result of that, his whole city got killed by Shimon and Levi. The only thing is that since he ended up doing a Brit Milah before he ended up dying, so he had a certain level of being Jewish. We're talking about before Matan Torah. The only mitzvah that they had was the idea of Brit Milah. And Brit Milah is the separation between the Goy and the Jew. So he sort of had a mini conversion that occurred before he got killed. And therefore, there was a necessity to have a tikkun, to fix up the chet that was done with Dinah, that was done by Shechem ben Chamor. Who was this tikkun? So when the Gilgul happened through the son, one of the great-grandchildren of Shimon, Zimri ben Salo, who ended up falling to the wayside and having an Isayan. He also had a test, and he ended up having relations with Cosby. He ended up having this test of Arayot, and he himself made the mistake that happened to his previous Gilgul, and also made a mistake, also causing the death of 24,000 people. Because of his mistake, 24,000 people ended up dying as a result of that. So interestingly, Levi was the one who ended up killing all of Shechem. He was the zealot that went and killed all of Shechem. And also over here, Pinchas, who was a great descendant of Levi, ended up being the one who ended up killing over here also Zimri, doing the same exact thing. Also, interestingly enough, Shimon was one of the zealots who ended up killing Shechem, but in this case, he was on the bad side. He was on Zimri's side. Zimri was from the descendants of Shimon. So we have Levi, the descendant of Levi, killing the descendant of Shimon as a result of his mistake in falling from this Nisayon. So we have to have a tikkun for this one also. Who is that tikkun? Here's where it becomes relevant for Sfirat HaOmer. That's the great Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was given the task of having to have this Nisayon to come in his place in order to be a tikkun for this mistake that occurred of the 24,000 people that died. And of course we know that Rabbi Akiva lost 24,000 Talmidim. His great wife Rachel knew that he was here for this Gilgul, for this tikkun, and she married him and refused to have him come back 12 years until 24 years passed, and he had 24,000 Talmidim, as is brought in the Sifrei Mekubalim. When he had these 24,000 Talmidim and they all died, that was a tikkun for the chet of what occurred, these big tzaddikim, or incredible tzaddikim. That was a tikkun of the chet that happened previously by the door of Shimon and previously by Shechem, and the whole entire catastrophe that happened previously to this. But that wasn't enough. He needed to make a tikkun for the chet that happened previously. And that's what we have the Gemara that brings it to Nesrufus, his everlasting enemy of Rabbi Akiva that couldn't stand him and hated what an angelic figure this person was speaking to his wife, who was a very, very beautiful woman, and they decided together, as a good goy would like to do, that they're going to go ahead and make Rabbi Akiva stumble. And he sent his wife to go ahead and actually be mefatet, to go ahead and convince Rabbi Akiva to make a very grave and bitter mistake. When she went to him, as the Gemara says, she did something uncanny, something unusual, that someone would never do such a thing. And she revealed her thigh. Could you imagine that? A woman would reveal her thigh. That's what this Goya did, something that would be unheard of in such a thing, just to make you realize where we're holding compared to where they were at that time. And since she was such beauty, it shed light, says the Gemara, in the whole entire room. But Rabbi Akiva didn't look. Rather, what did he do? It says over there that he spit, and then he cried, and then he laughed. So she wanted to know what's the message behind all these things. So he said 2 out of 3, I'll tell you. He spit to say, this is what you come from. This is where your source of such beauty comes, from such a small piece of seed. And then he says he cried because such beauty such beauty is going to end up going straight to the ground and decompose and become like nothing and just turn into a bag of bones and so useless. And here it is, how Kadosh Baruch Hu runs the world in doing that. And she says, and what's for the laughter? He said, Adkan, excuse me, I gotta go. I'm sorry. And he didn't explain. Lamaisa, she was so mummified, couldn't believe this exemplary type of person that could take such a scenario, A, run away like a Yosef Tzaddik, and B, see it in such an intellectual way and be able to see everything that she stood for in such a perspective. And she ended up divorcing her husband, converting, and believe it or not, she ended up marrying Rabbi Akiva, as the Gemara reports. And that's one of the ways that Rabbi Akiva actually became very wealthy, because she was a very wealthy woman. Anyways, he ended up marrying her, and then eventually when she was married, she said, "No, I'm your wife. You have to be able to tell me everything. We don't hold secrets from our wives," as we all know. And he ended up telling her, well, I'll tell you what the laugh was about. He laughed because he said, "I knew that instead of having that chas v'shalom not to fall into the Isser, this would only be in a derech hamotor. He knew that you would end up marrying me anyways." That's what the Gemara says. But we see from this incredible test that he ended up making a tikkun for the sin of the previous Gilgul that happened with that. From here we see a very important yesod, and that is every little action that we do has tremendous ramifications in many different worlds. We don't realize the little things we do, the little nisyonot that we pass that people don't notice, no one ever sees, but everything comes back to the Shem Shamayim. It comes back to that place. And that's why Rabbi Akiva was so excited at the time when he was being Mekadesh Shem Shamayim, because he realized Kol Yomai Iti Mechazer, he was being Mechazer to go ahead his whole entire life to be Mekadesh Shem Shamayim. We're not supposed to look to be Mekadesh Shem Shamayim to die Al Kiddush Hashem, but he knew that he was reading his epics. He realized that he was accomplishing his tikkun of his Gilgul. After him there will be no more Gilgulim of this previous cycle, because he realized he was accomplishing his task. And from here I want to bring out one important idea, and that is the importance to realize what lies in every little action that we do. Whether we see it for people outside or hidden in the world, we don't realize that they are things that are actually cataclysmic in the whole entire world. They affect the whole entire world. From here till we know every little every little flap of a butterfly affects the whole entire world, and our little actions affect everything. We know in science that there is a rule in science that is the idea of the conservation of energy, that there's not one piece of energy that is wasted. Everything is held and nothing disappears. It only gets transferred from one place to the next. If you're swinging on a swing and you have energy and you want to slow down, so you cause friction in your feet when you slow yourself down on the ground, and that friction is the transference of energy from one place to the next. Every action that we do is never wasted. It is utilized to its detail. HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees everything, and it comes, like we just spoke out, with many different details of where it comes from. And with this, I'm going to end with an incredible story which kind of brings out this idea, a true story that happened with Rav Chanan Wasserman from Baranovich. Over there, he was having a tremendous amount of financial stress to be able to support his incredibly large yeshiva. Of course, we knew he was extremely successful Rosh Yeshiva in Baranovich. He tried to go to Russia, he tried to go to Poland, but to no avail. He was not successful until he realized he's going to have to make that dreadful trek to America for many reasons. First of all, the trek at that time was crazy to be able to go. It was dealing with a trek of it meant a half a year trip. There was no El Al flights at the time, and he knew what it meant basically is that he's going to have to go by buggy and then by boat, and besides the incredible expense behind it, the amount of time and stress and energy that he will have to utilize to get there. But he realized it was a necessity to support his Bachrim who couldn't even put food on the table. Pashut, literally food on the table. Finally, when he made it to America after over a month of traveling, he asked and spoke to someone acquaintance of his that he knew, a person by the name of Antel, and he told him that there's a person by the name of Philip Goldstein, who was originally known as Pinchas Wasserman, coincidentally the same last name. I don't know, had a little bit of a relation maybe, but he said this Pinchas Wasserman already changed his name to Philip Goldstein. And he is an incredibly wealthy person. He's one of the more wealthy people over here in New York. He lives in Manhattan. He said, go ahead and go to him and maybe you'll get some money out of him. He said, okay, take me. He said, I'll be honest with you. This guy's completely off the derech. He used to be a Pinchas. He turned into a Philip. He's totally not religious, A. And I have to be honest with you, he's a complete kamtzan, a very stingy person. Doesn't like to give tzedakahs. You're not going to get too far with him. But, verves, go ahead and try. You never know. Rav Chanan decided, I'm going to go to him, because he also remembered that he knew him as a Cheder Yingal in Europe. He remembered that they grew up together when they were younger until they each parted their own ways. He tried to go and catch up with his secretary once, twice, 3 times. I'm sorry, Mr. Goldwasser, he's too busy. I'm sorry, Philip just can't answer the phone. I'm sorry, until he finally was able to go and circumvent the secretary, get the message to this Philip, who recognized Rav Chanan Wasserman's name as his old childhood friend, and he delightfully invited him to come into his office in Manhattan. Baruch Hashem, they came and they exchanged some old stories from the past. You remember this? You remember that teacher? You remember this? You remember when we did this and that? And they were very much enjoying the conversation. He asked him, so what are you doing now? So Rav Chanan told him, well, I learned in Radin by the great Chofetz Chaim. Eventually I moved to the Koil in Kovna. And then eventually I was able to open a shiva in Baranovich. And I have, Baruch Hashem, 400 Talmidim now that I'm taking care of, and I'm teaching them over there. And what's with you, Phil? What's going on with you? Pinchas, in other words, he didn't call him Philip. He said, and what's going on with you? So Pinchas told him, well, when I was 17 years old, I finished, yeshiva days, and I decided to make the trek over here to the Golden Medina. I decided to come to America. And I was able to fix a broken sewing machine, and I started sewing things for people. And slowly but surely, with the extra little money change I was able to open a store, and from a store to a company. And from here I have a massive corporation now, and I'm employing 300 people. Rav Chanan 400 Talmidim, him 300 employees. I am considered the biggest coat factory in Manhattan, and I have a big name, and Baruch Hashem, I am very successful. I'm not sure if he said the word Baruch Hashem. Anyways, that was the exchange that they had. So then, after, like we said, having a little bit more of a sicha, of a kesher between them, he said, so what brings you here? Harav, why'd you come? Why'd you end up coming to America? So he said, I just came to say hi. It was so nice to see you. He said, come on. You don't come to America to say hi. He said, no, that's why I came. Thank you so much for having me. It was so enjoyable seeing you. It's time to part our ways. And Rav Chanan left. And that's it. He left on his ways without telling him anything or asking him any requests. After 2 or 3 days, he received a phone call from this Philip, from this Pinchas. And he told him, Arav, can you come? I want to have a little bit more conversation with you. I really miss you. I want to speak a little bit more before you go back to Europe. So he said, no problem. They came and they met again in his office, and he told them, I can't sleep. Why did you come? I got to know. Come on, tell me. I'm tossing and trying. I'm trying to figure it out. I'm guessing here and guessing there. I guess back then there weren't so many schnorrers. There weren't so many people collecting for yeshiva, so the guy couldn't figure it out. But anyways, he was asking him, what? Come on, tell me the truth. Why did you come? So he told him, all right, if you're already pushing me, I'm going to tell you the truth. You see this frock I'm wearing? I'm wearing a frock. It has 2 buttons in the back. One is loose. It's a little bit loose and needs tightening. And the other one already fell off. And I need someone to replace the buttons. You have a button factory. You have a whole coat factory. You do buttons. So I came here in order to tighten up the loose button and replace my button. I would really appreciate if you could help me out. What? Are you serious? Do I look like I'm crazy? Do you know this corporation I built because I'm a very intelligent person? You're talking to me like I'm some dodo bread, like there's something wrong with me. Are you being serious? Nobody comes from Europe to America, especially with the trek that the Rav had to put out, in order to go ahead and sew a couple buttons. Come on, let's be real. He said, I don't understand. Why not? I need to sew a couple buttons. Why not? He said, come on. The amount of money you spent just on this trip is just about almost over 100 rubles. And to go ahead and sew on a button is a kaputala. It's 1 kaputala. How much does it cost in order to be able to do it? Come on, let's be real. Be honest with me. Tell me why you came. He goes, no, the buttons. Can you help me out? I just need help with the buttons. They exchanged, made a few exchanges, and that's it. He couldn't help himself. Eventually, he said to him, look, Arav, I can't. You have to tell me why you're here. You wouldn't come all this way just for a few buttons. So he asked him, you mean I wouldn't do it? Why not? Because I wouldn't do it because it's not worth it to make the whole long trek? He goes, yes. He says, so the Rav Chanan told him, well, let me tell you something. The Gemara in Chagiga says, the famous Gemara says, the incredible trek that the neshama has to go from the higher worlds to the lower worlds in order to come here. The complex world that we live in that was created by this bara, and the screaming and the yelling that the neshama does before he has to come this whole entire trip and be thrown into the body that is here. Why does he come all this way? For a few buttons? Is that why he flew all this way? He made the whole trek only in order to make a few buttons, to produce a few coats and make a few bucks, to be able to do that? It's got to be that he's here for a bigger reason. As the Mesilas Yesharim writes in the first parak, it's got to be that he made this whole entire trek not for a few buttons. He must be here for a bigger reason. Pinchas Do you remember where you came from? Do you remember the sources where you come from? All of that you came from, the neshama that comes, has got to be something bigger than the corporation and these 300 workers that are working for you. Pinchas started to cry for the first time in over a couple decades. It has been so long since he felt it in his, he misses, he remembers going back to those days and coming back. Immediately, Rav Yochanan opened the Gemara and learned with him one of the Gemaras that they learned when they were chavruses as young children together when they were 10, 11 years old. And he started learning and he couldn't get enough of it. He was sweeping it up and with trembled tears in his eyes, he was so emotionally connected to this Gemara. He said, Rav, you've got to stay and learn with me. He said, well, I can't stay, but I'm going to set you up with a chavrusa and Bezrat Hashem, you will continue to be able to do that. In the end of the day, Rav Yochanan was Megal Sod. He told him in the end of the day when he asked, so why did you come? And he told him, well, the real reason I came is for the yeshiva. And the guy told him, the next 2 years of your yeshiva support, full support, it's on me. I'm taking care of the next 2 years in Baranovich. You can go back there, feel comfortable. They're going to be taking care of Kalkali with their economic situation, and everything is going to be okay. You know, there's a song they made based on this story that I just quoted. You don't go to America for a few kaftarim, for a few buttons. We don't move. Can we try to remember, can we try to think, if we're investing blood, lifeline, the amount of years that we have in something that we are only going to find ourselves when we turn 60, 65, 70, and it's time for retirement age, and we only have, come on, let's be realistic, a few more years left after that, B'ezrat Hashem. We always say at Mea Ve'esrim to be optimistic, and it's very nice, but I don't know too many people that made it that far. Let's live it to 90. We'll give you 90, and unfortunately we know it does happen sometimes at 75, 80, 85. You know, it's one thing to use up blood, how much time, energy. Time is money, or is money time? Remember how much you put into your life, how much you expend into it, and don't waste it on a few buttons. I understand to get that more comfortable house, that nicer shaitel, to be able to have those extra expendices and those weddings, those flabbers weddings that we have. But let's go ahead and invest it in the right place. I'll be honest with you, here in Eretz Yisrael, I don't speak about this. I'm not going to give this drasha here in Eretz Yisrael because I don't think that's over being done. But over here, I see over and over about what's happening sometimes on the other side of the ocean, and we start realizing that, you know, if you can't control it over there, maybe you should be moving to Eretz Yisrael. But if not, at least remember Rav Yochanan's message. We don't do it just for a few buttons. We don't waste life just for a few buttons. Every action that you do has so much potencies. Rabbi Akiva's Gilgul, that went ahead and he did such a little thing by just walking away from Eshes Tronos Rufus, what every Vayimayan video is discussing. He did just that little bit of thing, and he caused an absolute effect in the whole entire world, all the Gilgulim and everything that he infected. Let's take this message, put it into our kishkas, and remember to go ahead and fix those buttons. Shabbat shalom.